On this Wednesday night, extreme weather catastrophes on two coasts.
We urge people to please check with your neighbors.
Atlantic Canada gets lashed while BC prepares for another punishing storm. Justice for a Black American murdered by 3 white men.
Guilty, guilty, guilty.
I never thought this day would come.
Why the killer's legal troubles are far from over. Milking it for all it's worth. Global News investigates how dairy farmers pushed prices to an all-time high. And on a collision course,
it's not going to be good for us.
NASA's quest to ram a spacecraft into an asteroid.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We are watching the flood situation on two coasts. In BC, all eyes are on two wet weather systems moving toward the waterlogged west coast. And across the country in Atlantic Canada, there is a super soaker of a storm that has inundated communities in 2 provinces. In Nova Scotia, residents living in and around the town of Antigonish are assessing the damage from the excessive rain that fell yesterday, swamping homes and washing out roads through rural areas. Portions of the picturesque Cabot Trail along the coast of Cape Breton have also been cut off after more than 200 millimeters of rain fell in some areas. In southwestern Newfoundland, 4 sections of the Trans-Canada Highway have been washed out, cutting off the community channel Porto Basque and the route from one of the island's ferry ports. As we saw in British Columbia, climate change is making weather systems like these more intense. Ross Lord starts our coverage with the unprecedented storm on the Atlantic coast, where the rain just keeps coming.
This highway near Antigonish, Nova Scotia, is one of dozens in the province either closed or completely severed.
There's 8 homes sitting between the 2 washouts here, so they're sort of stranded at the moment.
At the height of the floodwaters in Antigonish, people in these mini homes had to be rescued by boat.
Worked hand in hand along with the fire services, and we got her down, got those people out of there and get them up on the dry land at least. And with the animals and stuff, we did our best to get them all out.
Their homes and their lives have been knocked off kilter, leaving residents like Marie Swim wondering where they'll live.
I don't know. We're staying in a motel for a few days. Red Cross put us up, so we're going to try and clean out, but right now we're not sure. In
Cape Breton, washouts threatened to cut some people off from hospital access. Public Works planners say in recent years they've been installing larger culverts for larger storms, but this one has proven too powerful.
Just with the sheer magnitude of, in some areas, excess of 270 millimeters of rain, that I don't think there's a lot of preparation that could have handled that.
The impacts are compounded because the storm has now stretched over several days. Less severe here in Halifax, but in other parts of the Atlantic region, people are still in the thick of it. The west coast of Newfoundland and Labrador is also getting hammered. The storm knocking out sections of the Trans-Canada Highway. Officials are considering contingency plans like redirecting ferry service so the island's supply chains don't get cut off.
It's more the state of the road condition in transferring goods and services from Porto Basque across the Trans-Canada Highway. But so Marine Atlantic is in constant contact with us and multiple government departments, and they'll make that call.
Also watching closely is the federal government.
I know the people of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland are not unfamiliar with heavy rainstorms, but this one seems to be particularly challenging.
Authorities and waterlogged homeowners say it will take days just to assess the damage and even longer to complete repairs. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Let's bring in Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell. Anthony, we're seeing incredibly wet weather on 2 coasts. Are these similar storm systems, and how much more rain is still to come?
Hey, Robin. While these systems are not directly related, they are 2 separate entities, they do have similarities. And I want to talk about atmospheric rivers because both of them are just that. Rivers in the sky that transport water vapor from the tropics up into the more polar regions. And as they interact with terrain, in this case perpendicular to Newfoundland and Cape Breton, it delivers copious amounts of rainfall that is continuing, although now starting to weaken on the east coast. So some good news as the rain lets up there. Meanwhile, another round of heavy rain pushing towards the BC coast. This is the first of 3 atmospheric rivers that are going to impact the area over the course of the next week. Now, at any given time, there are about 4 or 5 atmospheric rivers around the planet. Most of the time they're out over the oceans, but occasionally they interact with land, and when you have the Rocky Mountains like we have in BC, they can rake those clouds and just deliver incredible amounts of rain and flooding. There's atmospheric river number 2 on Sunday, perhaps more intense in the storm ahead of us, and the third one may be the strongest yet, that by the middle of next week. Just including the first 2 systems, we may be seeing 100 to 150 millimeters of rain for those hardest hit areas, even more as you go up the coast towards central BC. A lot of rain on the way and freezing levels going up, so the snow is going to begin to melt in the mountains as well. Robin?
Anthony Farnell in Toronto. British Columbians are bracing for that onslaught of storms, and they're not expected to be as powerful as the system that flooded parts of the province last week. But there is still concern they could threaten recovery efforts. Mike Armstrong reports.
There is a value to keeping busy. It keeps your mind from focusing on the negative. Well, they are very busy in the community of Arnold, BC. It's south of Abbotsford, tucked up against the U.S. border. Basically one street with devastation on both sides. The flooding destroyed the entire first floor of Sandy Faber's home. Keeping busy keeps her mind off, among other things, the weather forecast.
You know, I don't even want to go. I don't even think that. Like, I can't even go there.
The people here have lived a trauma. Some say the way they think about water has changed. The heavy rain in the forecast is not good news.
People are terrified. I saw water rising up in my back ditch yesterday, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's coming back.
At this point, if something happens, people are more prepared. Resources that were brought in after the flood are already here. The military has deployed 500 ground troops. But some are saying those resources should have been here before the flooding. British Columbia doesn't have an army base.
Well, I haven't seen the military here, but that's just me.
Calling in the army is supposed to be a last resort, but it happens. Over the last 6 years in Canada, the military has been called in to help with natural disasters 22 times. Now, there are 2 bases in BC, but both are on Vancouver Island. CFB Comox is an Air Force base, and CFB Esquimalt is a naval base. Army deployments are made out of Alberta, CFB Edmonton on the other side of the Rockies. The Army base in British Columbia, CFB Chilliwack, was shut down in the late 90s. Its 4,000 personnel were sent to Alberta, Quebec, and New Brunswick.
What do we want? Save the base!
It was a controversial decision at the time, and one some would like revisited.
There's no doubt about it. They should never have closed Chilliwack, ever.
Spencer Coyne is the mayor of Princeton, BC. It's a small town in the mountains, about 200 kilometers east of Vancouver. It has been hit hard, and Coyne has requested the help of the military. If it comes, it will be soldiers based in Edmonton. Help for BC, he says, should be closer.
We're getting hit time and time again. This summer, we called in the Army to help fight fires. This fall, we're calling in the Army to help us with flooding. And it's on and on and on.
Back in Arnold, they keep a list of things the community needs. The Army isn't on it. The top of the list is pretty simple. A hug. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Abbotsford, BC.
In Georgia, 3 white men have been found guilty in the murder of an unarmed black man, Ahmaud Arbery. The jury deliberated for just 11 hours over 2 days in a case that's been viewed as another test for racial injustice in the United States. Jackson Proskow reports on the verdict and the reaction.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty.
In a sweeping indictment of their guilt, the jury convicted Travis McMichael, his father Gregory, and their neighbor William Bryan of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. Outside the court, reaction was immediate.
Guilty, as I knew it would.
Justice is being served.
Each man faced 9 separate charges. Travis McMichael, who fatally shot Arbery, was the only man convicted on all counts, including malice murder. The other men were found guilty of the lesser felony murder.
I never thought this day would come, but God is good.
During brief deliberations, the mostly white jury asked to review key pieces of evidence. including video of the moment when Arbery was fatally shot.
He moved toward Mr. Arbery with the gun.
The trial centered around motive. The men claimed they suspected Arbery was responsible for recent burglaries and were attempting a citizen's arrest.
And they made their decision to attack Ahmaud Arbery in their driveways because he was a black man running down the street.
Throughout the trial, prosecutors focused on what they called driveway decisions, assumptions made by the men based on video showing Arbery inside a house under construction in the months prior.
Turning Ahmaud Arbery into a victim after the choices that he made.
The defense repeatedly stoked public outrage, making racially charged comments about Arbery's appearance
with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails.
And complaints about supporters of the Arbery family in the courtroom.
We don't want any more black pastors coming in here.
For many in this community, the verdict signals that justice is possible, but it does not bring back a young man who was killed for committing no crime.
The spirit of Ahmaud defeated the lynch mob.
The searing images of Arbery's final moments have forever changed Georgia. The state has now repealed a Civil War-era law that allowed for citizen arrests. Meanwhile, the three men still face a separate trial on federal hate crime charges. That's set to begin in February. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
There was major progress today in Canada's vaccination campaign. Clinics for children aged 5 to 11 are now open in multiple provinces. A therapy dog named Bemal was on hand in Montreal this morning as the first children lined up for their shots. Organizers say they're doing what they can to make the experience more kid-friendly.
And I thought I would cry, but it's just one needle. They put it in your arm, and then it's just better now. That's all. You just really just have to look somewhere else. Don't look at your vaccination, and then it's done. Before you know it, it's done.
The House of Commons vaccine mandate was one of several hot topics on Parliament Hill today. MPs gathered for their first question period since the election. And as Michael Couture reports, the opposition was on the attack.
The Conservative caucus presented Aaron O'Toole with a hockey jersey Wednesday morning, setting the tone for another session of full contact question period.
The speech from the throne mentioned inflation once. Shameful. Just once, Mr. Speaker. So is the Prime Minister having trouble understanding the concerns of Canadian families, or does he just not care?
Yeah. That economic attack was repeated over and over again, and the Prime Minister pushed back with a familiar line.
The member opposite talked about families. That's exactly why we're moving forward with $10 a day childcare right across the country.
It all played out with a full House of Commons, something we haven't seen in 20 months, and something we may not see if the Liberals get their way.
But, Mr. Speaker, we are not out of this pandemic.
The government tabled a motion to bring back hybrid parliament until June 23rd. The Conservatives and Bloc say it's a question of accountability.
We saw ministers sitting in their offices, avoiding the scrutiny and the pressure that comes from actually sitting in Parliament.
The Liberals say it's a question of safety, especially after a member of the Conservatives had a breakthrough case of COVID-19. And there continue to be questions about how many Tories are unvaccinated with medical exemptions. Some Conservatives left caucus with bags of COVID-19 rapid tests, which caucus chair Scott Reid says have been made available for the last month out of an abundance of caution. But that didn't stop the Prime Minister from taking a political potshot.
Canadians returned us with a very clear mandate, all of us, to end this pandemic once and for all, which happens through vaccinations, guys.
And that was just the first full day, Robin, perhaps a signal of what to expect for the next 3.5 weeks.
Michael Couture in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. Tragedy strikes in the English Channel. Coming up, the dozens of migrants who perished while on a perilous journey. At least 31 migrants trying to reach the UK from France died when their boat sank in the English Channel. France says it is the deadliest tragedy involving migrants at the dangerous crossing. It's believed 34 people were on the boat. 2 people have been rescued. A third is still missing, but the search has been called off. 5 women and a little girl are among those who died. French police arrested 4 people with suspected links to the incident. The COVID crisis in Europe has hit another dangerous level, with multiple countries setting new records for daily cases. The Czech Republic, Hungary, the Netherlands, and Slovakia all reported their highest number of daily infections today. With cases surging across Europe, more countries are imposing tough new restrictions. Slovakia is entering a 2-week lockdown. In Italy, 20 small towns have imposed an 8 p.m. curfew. France is expected to reveal new measures later this week. There was a stark warning today about the escalating crisis in Europe. The WHO says the region is once again the epicenter of the pandemic. Last week, Europe accounted for more than 60% of all reported cases and deaths worldwide. Officials say there's a false sense of security around vaccines, and even vaccinated people must take more precautions.
Even in the midst of a very, very strong resurgence in cases, we're seeing pre-pandemic levels of social mixing, gathering, and many other things. And the reality is the virus will continue to transmit intensely in that environment.
The EU's Public Health Agency is now recommending booster shots for all adults in Europe to help protect people from infection. Money milking still ahead, why you can expect to dole out more for dairy in the new year. Expect the price of dairy to jump next year. The Canadian Dairy Commission is proposing a record increase for 2022. Farmers would be paid more, but the cost of milk, cheese, and other Canadian dairy products would go up too. Critics say the Crown Corporation is giving more weight to producers than consumers when setting prices. Eric Sorensen has more.
If you're worried about rising food costs, get ready for a hike in dairy products. Producers have been hit by higher fuel prices and a big jump for animal feed.
It's gone up by 27%. And there's no shortcuts we can take with that. Cows have to be fed to produce milk.
But the proposed payments to dairy farmers is contentious. The Canadian Dairy Commission's usual formula initially determined a price increase of 6.4%, according to internal documents obtained by Global News. The previous record increase was 4.5%. But dairy farmers felt they needed more, and the Commission ultimately recommended 8.4%, almost double the previous record. It's necessary to keep up with his costs, says one farmer.
We're playing catch up because I've had to pay those costs for the last 6 months.
Retailers and restaurants, who will pay more for milk, wanted just a 3.3% hike. Critics believe decision-making at the Canadian Dairy Commission favors producers under a supply management regime that already guarantees those farmers a minimum price. This expert says the CDC needs reform.
Make it more transparent, change the governance of the CDC, which would include processors, restaurant, and consumers as well. Give them a voice.
What about the price of milk? The price of milk is nuts. Indeed. That's why we're working on affordability.
The Trudeau government says dairy farmers are not abusing the system.
Last year, only about 9% of them had revenues over their expenses. So I think the work that the Commission has done is fair.
We've also been clear. I mean, this government is going to protect the supply managed sector.
But that sector will usher in milk prices up to 10% higher by some estimates, which would hit hard low-income families already facing other price increases.
These very vulnerable families are going to be drowning in increased prices. Fluid milk is a staple for Canadian diet. Therefore, there's a social safety net that needs to be put around this important product.
The supply management system does ensure a safe and adequate supply of milk for Canadians. But if provincial authorities approve, new dairy prices will kick in February 1st. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Up next, DART Defense, how NASA's latest test mission might help save planet Earth. Take a look at this dramatic footage of Spain's La Palma volcano. A new stream of lava has reached the ocean, sending clouds of potentially toxic gases into the sky. As the volcanic material cools, it extends the island's surface. It has already grown by 43 hectares since the eruption began just over 2 months ago. Well, it may sound like a flashback to a Hollywood blockbuster, but NASA's latest mission is very real. The space agency has just launched DART, a spacecraft designed to smash into an asteroid. It's supposed to test if technology can actually stop dangerous space debris from hitting our planet. So how worried should we be? Mike Drolet explains.
If you gaze towards space long enough, you're bound to see a shooting star. And as people say, make a wish.
3, 2, 1.
Well, NASA's latest launch is less about the things we wish upon and more about anything we wish will avoid Earth altogether.
But if there's anything that's slightly larger, so anything bigger than 30 meters in size, it could cause some damage depending on where it impacts. Anything that's really, really big, bigger than 140 meters in size, so just like a small football stadium, it could be devastating for life on Earth.
And that's where DART comes in.
Vehicle supersonic.
It's a small spacecraft designed to deliberately crash into an asteroid as part of NASA's planetary defense strategy. Its target is Dimorphos, a small asteroid orbiting a larger one. And no, neither is on a collision course with Earth, nor is any other large asteroid they're tracking. This is merely a test to see if they can alter Dimorphos's course. So if the Earth was ever in peril, we could do something about it.
That's how 70% of all life on Earth died. So if something of significant size hit us, we're going to go bye-bye. It's not going to be good for us.
A camera will record DART's collision next September, which will no doubt be thrilling.
I know they are partying it up wherever they're watching from.
It just won't be Hollywood thrilling.
There's too much debris, we gotta peel up!
In fact, while DART will collide with Dimorphos at 24,000 kilometers per hour, it will be more like a thud than an explosion. And maybe then the DART team can let loose.
Woo!
NASA style. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is the Musquodoboit River in Nova Scotia. We would love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you again this weekend. Have a great night.